That's great. We have lots of people joining. We're almost at the 30 people mark, so I think we'll get ourselves started. So just as a heads up, just wanted to say that we're recording this session. That's first. I hope everybody's fine with that. We wanted to extend a warm welcome to everybody who's on this call today. So I am Vanessa Van Bergen. I'm talking to you as an executive director for Chapter Zero Brussels. We are a directors climate forum, so we're a group of board members that want to work on our proper and other people's education, learning, continuous learning on everything which has to do on climate and on nature in the boardroom and its importance. I think if you're here on this call, I don't need to convince you further, and we're very happy for that. We want to thank our partners of KPMG, who kindly accepted our invitation to work together and on not only today, and that's why I wanted to share the slide that you're looking at today. So today we have a what we call an extended teaser in the form of this webinar on nature and biodiversity. We later in the year, so in December, just before we all hopefully go off for a good break on December 10th, we're having a biodiversity collage that we're organizing with our befriended organization, The Shift, and WWF, where we, and those of you who are familiar with the idea of a collage, is where we work on the cause and effect of everything that's happening in nature around us and the importance for businesses. If you want to sign up, please hurry for that, because we had a lot of interested and enthusiastic participants. So I think we're looking at 60 plus participants already at the moment. And then the third, and not the least important, is that we are preparing a masterclass, a one-day learning opportunity that we're doing together with our friends of KPMG and Accenture, where we also have 5 or 6 externals will do on March 13th. So I really would like you to explore we have a draft agenda on our website of Chapter Zero, and we'll send it after the call also with the summary of this edition. So with that, I'll pause there. So please, if you want to scan, I think, or the collage or the masterclass, the QR code, so you go directly to those pages where you can have more information or even sign up. And I leave the page here for a couple of minutes while I introduce our keynote speaker of this afternoon. And you see Fiorella here, Fiorella Sanchez, with the beautiful pink background, and already mentioning what she's going to talk about partly is the COP16. Fiorella is a bachelor and master professional in biodiversity and nature, and she is the lead for biodiversity and nature for KPMG in Europe, Middle East, and Asia. She has a scientific background, has worked for NGOs, international institutions, but also in academia across the world almost. I can say Fiorella in LATAM, in Europe, and also in Central Asia. So she's traveled quite a bit, and she can share part of that experience with us. She's working with KPMG for over 3 years, helping clients on their sustainability and biodiversity journey. So very nice, great to have you with us. Just on the agenda, so that everybody knows a bit what we're going to do in the next 55 minutes. Fiorella is going to talk to us 35-40 minutes, and we'd like it to be on-screen interactive. That is, if you want to share questions, please put them in the Q&A. So it's the little bubble on the below on your screen with a question mark on it. Her colleague Clément, Stéphane, and myself are going to capture these questions and group them a bit so that we can share them and hopefully address them at the end of the session. Just after Fiorella, we'll have Bart Corijn, who's also on screen. Maybe wave, Bart, so we all know who you are. He's joining us from our friends of The Shift, and he would like us to talk a little bit about the biodiversity shift and how to develop a nature strategy. And thank you for being with us, Bart. And then we'll wrap it up so that you can go to your afternoon program. So thank you for being here. And Fiorella, I stopped sharing my screen. I hope you have all scanned the QR codes, and I'll leave the screen to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Vanessa, for the warm introduction. And as mentioned, I'm sharing my screen. Yes. So over the next 35, 40 minutes, the idea is to go into why biodiversity in nature is a strategic topic, especially for the boardroom, but also for executives and also for sustainability managers and more. The aim of this next, let's say, half an hour is not to go through definitions, technicalities, frameworks, but to really phrase why are we talking about this topic? Why is it so relevant? And why is it that it's coming more often in LinkedIn, in negotiations, in policies, in regulations in the European Union, for example? And to just, let's say, the aim is to end up with a reflection on let's take it into the conversations moving forward in our own companies. I will be doing so with three main points in the presentation. The first one is setting the scene, so nature and biodiversity as a topic of increasing relevance. Then I will deep dive briefly into my personal takeaways from COP16, which is the conference of the party that I was attending 2 weeks ago in Colombia. And lastly, I will finish with an overview of understanding nature and biodiversity from a strategic perspective for the long-term business value. But before I start, I want to put in the table two main reflections. It's okay to be honest. The first one is, did you and your company considered climate change relevance 8 or 10 years ago? My second question is, does your company addresses climate change considerations in the boardroom today? The reason for these two questions is because we have lessons of seeing how the climate change market evolution happened over the last 8 years or 10 years. Although the scientific evidence and the case to engage climate change was already clear and mainstreamed, it's since the Paris Agreement in 2016 that policies, the regulators started increasingly adopting regulations and also voluntary standards. Also, let's say around that same period, society has been awakening. And of course, that has led to business action, where we have today as indicative numbers that at least 4,000 companies have approved SBTI targets, which is just one standard. There's many more companies adopting climate change action. We have from the European Central Bank numbers of that by 2024, 61% of EU business investments. And most importantly, that 92% of boards have formal oversight over climate change, making this one of the main topics for upskilling of boardrooms. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because we as humans act on what we understand and we accept. And this takes time. It's a natural human behavior for time to be needed to absorb new information. And that has happened with climate change, when initially we didn't understand the relationship between climate change and business. And now it's almost a given for some regions of the world, of course, but it's almost a given that there's action needed. The case with biodiversity, it's a little bit different because as you can see, here we have a period of approximately 4 years. And what has happened in 4 years is, in a nutshell, everything. We have signed the equivalent of the Paris Agreement, but in parallel, we had voluntary standards coming in. We had policies being developed in the European Commission. We have national also policies. We have international standards adopting new ways of approaching biodiversity. So a lot is happening at the same time in a very disorganized manner, meaning that a lot of things are happening at the same time. And of course, it's logical that it's quite a new topic. The issue or the point is that in this case, we won't have the 8 years that we had for climate change. We have a very little onboarding time to understand what nature and biodiversity is. And I also want to stress that when we talk about this new topic, it's indeed a new topic, but it's also very intertwined with climate change. Climate change and biodiversity loss are two twin crises that are both human-made and of course relate one to the other. So they should, like when you approach it, I would suggest that you don't see it as a completely separate bucket of information, but you just extend how you approach environmental issues. The reason why we have to approach them together is because, for example, climate change is one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss, meaning that if we have global warming, if we have, let's say, a different concentration of GHG emissions in the atmosphere, our forest will be less healthy and will be less able to exist. But at the same time, if we lose those forests, if we lose those mangroves, the ability of nature to extract, to store carbon is going to be limited. And also the ability of nature to cope with environmental events, extreme droughts, hurricanes, and so many more will be also limited. So there's feedback loops between those two that cannot be overlooked. I'm not going to go in detail on this slide, but I think you cannot speak of a topic without phrasing what is the topic about. Nature and biodiversity are often seen like bees or something very, let's say, CSR. What we talk about here is there's two different terminologies, and they're quite important. One is biodiversity, and biodiversity is every living component on Earth. That means the trees, that means the insects, that means the mammals, and many more. When we talk about nature, nature copes with those living components, but also the non-living components, the soil needed for the trees to be standing, the water needed for those trees also to be healthy and living, the air, let's say the fresh water, the seas. So when we talk about nature, we talk about the complete system that in which we live. It's not only about one species, it's about the complete system. And of course, when we look at the complete system, there's key, what we call ecosystem services, that though that system provides society and the economy that are needed for a well-functioning. So this is everything I'm going to say in terms of definition, but it's really important to understand that what we are talking about here is a complete system that is interlinked between each other. And of course, climate, air, water, species are all interconnected. And what's happening now is that we are losing biodiversity, which is the metric that we use for assessing nature, at very unprecedented rates. We know that an overarching number is 73% of lost since 1970, but this is an overarching number, and in many different places of the world, especially in the global south where we are producing all our commodities, the loss is considerably higher. But when we talk about biodiversity loss, it's critical to understand that preserving, restoring, and sustainably managing biodiversity is not, it's an economic issue. It's not just an ethical issue, although it's really important also to maintain the component of making sure that the nature it's healthy, but it's an economic imperative. The business case from a societal point of view, that's what you can see here. It's completely set. We know that with, let's say again, round numbers, 44 trillion US dollars are moderate or highly dependent on nature. We also know that there's several opportunities to be untapped. There's an estimate of $5 trillion that are standing and have not yet been untapped. And I think an interesting result from the European Central Bank is that 75% of bank loans granted today in 2023 and 2024 are to companies that are nature dependent. This, of course, gives a hint of where the central bank is, let's say, raising red flags, and whether other banks will start looking into, because it's innate to the business sector, core business of the financial sector. However, this is a result that we have from KPMG's preliminary results, where we see that although the business case from an economic perspective, societal perspective is set, when we look at companies are still just starting to understand what this topic is and start to think about how to assess it. We have that some companies are already engaging in biodiversity in their materialities assessment thoroughly. Most of them are not yet there. But most importantly, in the right side of my slide is where biodiversity is being considered within an organization. And I think everything starts with the definition on biodiversity. We see that most companies are still not clear on what biodiversity means for them, and therefore the entire incorporation of biodiversity in assessments, in strategies, in governance will be less mature, because the first is to understand what does it mean for me. Again, I think that's a natural course of action. When we go back to my first message, we understand that this is a very fast-paced topic, and it's normal that companies are taking some time to engage with it. But this takes me to the second topic that I wanted to discuss, which is the main takeaways from the COP16, the COP on biological diversity. The reason why I want to bring this here is because, again, this topic, COP16, the international agreements, are those inputs for the boardroom that are really needed to shift direction and decision-making. What is the COP16? Maybe in here to phrase it, because I know this is quite new for many people. There is many different conferences of the parties. One that is very well known is the one for climate change, right? That's the Paris Agreement, which is the one that you can see on the top. The convention, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And that is currently being conducted as we speak. The second one that is gaining more business attention is the Convention on Biological Diversity. This is the one where I will be focusing my attention today. And this is the one that happened 2 weeks ago in Colombia. The third one that is gaining a little bit more saliency, but still not there, and you will hear it more often in coming years, is the UN Convention to Combat Desertification that is also happening this year in December. The importance of COP16 is that 2 years ago, in 2022, parties signed together, so countries signed together, a framework, international framework, to preserve 30% of land by 2030. This year, the parties, all the countries gathered together again 2 years after to think about how do we get to this target? What do we have to do? How do we implement? How do we finance it? And that's why it's so important, discussion that happened this time and then following, let's say, the following COPs for businesses and for, especially, as I said, boardrooms and senior level executives. There's many takeaways. There's many things that were decided in COP, but I'm going to spend some time in key strategic ones that I think that should be already in discussions within businesses. There is 23 targets. I have taken here a couple of them only, as you can see in pink. The first one is target 15. This one is well known by the business sector because this target is to make sure that businesses assess and disclose on biodiversity. This relates to the current processes on CSRD for European companies, on ISSB for international companies, and so on. The main takeaway here from informal and informal discussions that I had in COP is that the first sprint of biodiversity assessments and understanding has been quite light, but there's an increased awareness from auditors, from customers, and from policymakers on what biodiversity is, and there's going to be an increased expectations for company to get up to speed. This, in more, let's say, easy words, means that there's going to be a need or more challenge on if you have identified that biodiversity is not material, you will have an auditor challenging this consideration, especially in the value chain. And I personally have already experienced that. So you will foresee it moving forward. The second one, it's about target 2 and 3. Those two targets relate to restoring and conserving 30% of degraded ecosystems by 2030. This one is quite important for me because when we talk about conserving and restoring, I think it all sounds very nice, which I agree. I'm a biologist, so I fully agree. But when we try to match that restoration and that conservation with business expansion, I think there is a potential risk, not only in own operations, for example, within Europe with the new nature restoration law, but also in where we are sourcing our commodities and our products. Where are the mines that we are sourcing from? Would they be able to increase their permits for new places, or local policies in Brazil will start changing that status quo? So this is long-term vision that board members can start, let's say, inputting in decisions, especially in terms of supply chain transparency. If we don't know where we're sourcing, we cannot see these risks happening. We don't know which are the regulations that are going to be created in Brazil, in this case, to get to these targets. Third one is about incentives. And this one, I think it's quite critical because there is a complete shift to assess and change harmful incentives into positive ones. We know that already in Belgium, there is a, let's say, a review of existing incentives and suggestions to shift them. This is an immediate risk for companies. And this, again, pesticide use, mining, agriculture practices, transportation, genetic material, a lot of things can change in the short term for business operating here, and again, for the companies that are sourcing your key materials. So great relevance to understand that this will shift, this will happen, and how can your company start thinking about it up on front to turn it into an opportunity. Next one is target 19, which is about mobilizing resources. This was the whole point of the, let's say, the big elephant in the room in the COP16, and relates about mobilizing resources. How do we get to our global targets of the COP16? And in here, the conversation, although it's normally about governments, global governments from the global north allocating resources to the global south, there's already a lot of new and alternative discussions around the fact that businesses also have a role to play here. When we look at value chains, international value chains, while companies allocating resources to act and mitigate impacts, companies based in Belgium with let's say, operations in Thailand then we will be able to mobilize resources in that way. So this topic here is a critical one also to look out to. And last one is about the target 13, one of the main outcomes of the COP. And if you are in pharmaceuticals, chemicals, cosmetics, or agriculture sectors, I think that this is a very tangible, new news for you, is that there has been an agreement at COP16 to create what is called a fund, the Cali Fund. And this fund is going to be requesting companies that use genetic resources to allocate 1% of profits or 0.1% of revenues into this fund for the money to be, let's say, allocated back into the countries where this genetic resource was originally coming from. So again, there's much more in the conversations about COP16, but I just want to draw the attention to how the points can be used not only to flag risks, but also to, if we look it right on front, we can strategically look at our portfolios, look at our directions, and create opportunities, business opportunities. Which brings me, I think I already speaking about risks and opportunities, but a little bit of deep dive into understanding nature and biodiversity from a strategic perspective, more from a conceptual point of view with some cases. I want to start with the role of the board and why we decided to make this about the board. We understand that many sustainability matters are being acted at the sustainable manager level, and that is absolutely and perfectly fine. Now Bart will be explaining more on how to engage in strategies, on KPIs, metrics, targets, frameworks. But if we don't have the, let's say, top management buy-in, it's very difficult to bring this agenda forward. And what I've seen in my experience is that when we start this engagement and we bring this topic from the board as a strategic topic, again, from risks and opportunities, tangible risks and opportunities. As I said, we know that incentives will change. What do we do? These are our pressing points. How do we act on it? When it comes from the board, instead of being just one more reporting framework, it becomes a business enabler. And the reason why I think, and the places where we believe that boards can play a role are divided in these three. So I think oversight role of the board is to just make sure that the executive management team is aware of the coming regulations, not only in the country of headquarters, but as I said, in the coming regulations that are happening in main priority sourcing countries of key partners. And also to give a strategic lens on how to manage these transition risks. So oversight of what's coming in, what's happening. The second one is the strategic role. So really looking at the long term. And I think this is where biodiversity is critical in the long term, because we have short-term risks that can be managed, but also we have long-term opportunities that can be considered if we look it from a strategic point of view. And in here is bringing new, fresh ideas. For example, piloting innovative projects in specific sites of production plants, of mines, of agriculture sites. In here, we talk a lot about nature-based solutions and how to use existing subsidies and incentives to pilot this new, fresh ideas. And the last point is about leadership role of the board, which is about future-proofing. And in here, I also want to stress that the role of the board on appointing and following up on action, appointing people that will be able to drive the sustainability agenda with an eye on nature, biodiversity, climate, the social agenda, and governance, but understanding also the synergies between all these topics. So appointing somebody that would be able to capture the whole agenda and put emphasis on nature and biodiversity. And of course, also to understand how to, let's say, to reward, let's say, action. So with these key points, again, my main takeaway is that this topic, if it was from me, I would start here. I would start at the board when introducing a topic like nature and biodiversity, if possible. So I would encourage you to really bring this challenge to your conversations, your business conversations. Biodiversity loss is a driver of physical risks, and we have physical risks and transition risks. When we talk about physical risks, these are material risks, meaning that we have poor soil and therefore crops are not growing, so we cannot sell our product. Or we have landslides, or we have less pollination, and again, something is happening, we cannot sell our product. When we talk about transition risks, and I think those are the, let's say, the ones that are more tangible in the short term, again, only in the short term, is about the policies that are emerging. Everything that we're talking about COP16 are transition risks. And changes in consumer demand. That is also something that is expected to come. At the end, we are looking at a system, right? Microeconomics and macroeconomics together, playing. And as I said, also climate change considerations, social considerations, geopolitical considerations, and many more, inequality, and all playing together. But these risks cannot oversee the impact of nature. And I want to put this more tangibly with the example that we have very close to home with the nitrogen policy in Flanders, which I imagine is not a new topic for many of you. The reason why I want to draw on these policies, because in this case, is because first, to understand that this type of situations are what we call nature. So nature and biodiversity is not only about the trees and the bees, it's also about the complete system that help us exist as a society, as a business. The case of the nitrogen policy in Flanders is that over many years, this has not been accounted. The impact on the environment, on the soils, on the air has not been accounted. And there has been, let's say, an expansion of the intensive agriculture. Of course, at the end, what this led is to eutrophication, disruption of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, air pollution, and acid rain. So once, let's say, the government understands that there's this physical impact on the environment, they develop the draft nitrogen policy of Flanders, the PAS, which limits the manure and fertilizer use, reduce the pig stock by 30% by 2030, and sees cessations of 40 livestock farms in financial compensations. This data is a little bit not up to date. I didn't review this data for at least 6 months, so might be some changes. Please bear that in mind. But what does it happen? Once a policy is coming, which is a transition risk, we have an entire sector at risk of losing long-term capex, because there was a way of, let's say, engaging in a specific area, extensive agriculture. I take a loan, I do it for a long-term loan, and then there's a policy that is completely disrupting how I'm gonna be able to cover this debt, because I cannot have the same amount of animals. I cannot operate in the same way. So this is a clear and very local example of what biodiversity transition risks looks in practice. I have many more examples, but because of time, I am not going to deep dive. I will welcome you to join the master class that we're going to be giving in March to deep dive into more examples and to critically think how we can manage them. But as I said, many not only when we talk about deforestation in the Amazon. When we look at local context, we also have the deforestation and land clearance in Norway, an entire tourism industry. There's another case, very interesting one there. But again, I will leave them for afterwards. But I also want to stress the opportunities that I already have been talking about the opportunities for a while, but there's many different types of opportunities that we should be looking at. Top line growth. So how do we go into new markets, new services, new product lines? Cost reduction. I think this one is a critical one in terms of all the new regulations and how do we make, let's say, cost reductions in our current processes. Investment and asset optimization. So how do we strategically allocate capital allocation to maximize returns? And then we have, of course, brand reputation, employee value proposition, both two that are a little bit more intangible, could be sometimes more intangible, but very relevant, and regulatory and legal interventions, which relates to optimizing or strategically looking at grants and incentives to do nature-related transitions. And in here, I want to show another example of an opportunity. This is a case that I really like to show. It's, again, a very local example. It's not I want to stress here that this is not an example where KPMG was part. It's an example that we have very close to us, but it's not an example that we worked on. But this is not about, this is really about reflecting how things can happen and how positive impact and business value can be created at the same time. This example is about piloting of nature-based solutions. In this case, the company had transmission lines and transmission lines have regulatory constraints, meaning that when you have a transmission line, an electric transmission line, the bottom of the transmission line has to be cut. There's a radius, I think it's 50 meters, that has to be cut so that the lines are safe, that there is no risk of disruption or wildfires. The company has identified potential solution for the rehabilitation of these corridors, especially Natura 2000. The company started thinking about, okay, what can I do so that I don't clear all this land? And identified a potential solution. Again, this is an innovation that was happening within the company on how can you actually start using different native plants that have different growth patterns, meaning that one will grow like this in 1 month, but the other one will grow 5 centimeters. So that instead of having this square behind the line, there will be a V shape through the restoration with native vegetation. So this company applied to a new incentive to pilot this initiative. Again, support from subsidies and incentives, in this case, from the EU Commission, and did a program for 26 sites in Belgium and 7 sites in France. Once this initial program was finished, they saw very happily that there was the reduction in operation costs because of this nature-based solution, which means that because they have done this plantation of different patterns of vegetation, they didn't have to go so often to cut and maintain the land. So there's a reduction in cost just by using nature to help the company operate. And of course, there's also an enhancement in terms of the stakeholder perspective in local communities and overall. What this resulted is that the company, seeing all the advantages that the project brought, decided to continue expanding this project without the incentives, because there's a payment on the actions done. So this is, again, a case, very local one, where applying thinking outside the box and using the instruments that are around the company, multi-stakeholder partnerships, engagement with regulators, and many more, are enabling business opportunities. I close my my presentation here. I want just to leave you with 3 minutes of what I just spoke. And this, if you live with these 3 reflections, I'm the happiest person on earth. The first one is that nature and biodiversity bring short-term and direct business risks that are often, very often, overlooked today. The second one is that the boardroom is a critical place to start this conversation, again, from a strategic point of view. And the last one is that the international conversations, regional conversations, are dictating long-term trends for businesses. And boardroom members should have oversight of these decisions to not only engage the risks, but actually turn the risks into opportunities. With this, I close my presentation. I thank everybody for listening. And of course, I'm more than happy to receive questions, but first I will hand it over to Bart, that will be giving us an overview on some wonderful initiative that we'll have here in Belgium.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiorella, for this solid introduction, I would say, on the topic. I will just share my slides. I hope, yeah, I'm sharing my screen. It's just that, can you see my screen, Vanessa? No?
No, not for the moment. It's dark. We had it a moment ago.
I'll do that again.
Yeah, we have it there. Maybe if you can make it a bit bigger, would be great.
Size.
Yeah, no, otherwise we leave it in the previous.
I will
yeah,
have to stick with the smaller version then. Just a moment. No.
That's fine.
I'm really sorry that yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Bart from The Shift, and after this introduction from Fiorella, you probably wonder, okay, how do I get this going in my organization? And that is exactly what we try to do with a program we have launched recently together with WWF, called the Biodiversity Shift. It's a program that is aimed at an audience of different maturity. So we have a few components in it. First one is an inspiration track, really to get you going, and I'll talk a bit more about that. The core of what we do is a community of practice where we will in-depth guide you towards a nature strategy. And we would also like to amplify the voices of those companies that are already working on this full speed, so to say. But as I said, the first part of what we do is really aimed at those companies that are still dipping their toes in the water, wanting to understand better what could this mean for them, how do other organizations tackle this. So on a regular frequency, we bring inspiration sessions, showing you examples, showing you tools, methodologies, the latest developments in this landscape, and helping you to connect with other companies that are working on this. And as Vanessa already mentioned in the beginning, on the 10th of December, we are organizing jointly a biodiversity collage at Les Tanneurs in Brussels. But the main element of what we do is really a community of practice where we get our hands dirty, so to say, in a small group of like-minded organizations working together towards a concrete goal. And rather than doing this on a Belgo-Belgian basis, we are aligning ourselves with an international initiative from Business for Nature. I won't go into too much details here, but Business for Nature is a global coalition of about 100 non-profits, also profit organizations, and really being the voice of business in this area. In October of last year, they have launched a campaign. It's called Now for Nature, asking organizations to publish a nature strategy. And as part of this campaign, they have formulated a nature strategy handbook. And during the community of practice, this is exactly what we plan to do, is walking you through this nature strategy handbook and accompanying you in the development of a nature strategy. And this will be done jointly with a number of consultants. You see their names at the bottom, and Fiorella is obviously involved in this as well. I won't go into the technical details of this handbook. It's essentially not too complicated. What they ask us for a nature strategy to be acceptable for the Now for Nature campaign, there's only 4 minimum requirements. You need to have a materiality assessment, so identifying your impacts and dependencies, of which Fiorella also spoke. You have to have targets in place with regard to nature. You have to prove that you already have actions in place. And last but not least, and I think that's really important, and also the message that Fiorella gave, this nature strategy has to be approved at C-suite or board level. So in a nutshell, our biodiversity program consists of 3 components: the inspiration part, purely for those seeking awareness and inspiration. The ones that would like to move towards implementation and collaboration can join our community of practice, and we would love to help you mainstream your voice and do some advocacy in this area. So that's all from my side, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Bart, and thank you, Fiorella. Thank you, everybody. We have multiple questions in our chat, and in the meantime, I think Fiorella had a little bit time to look at them, and she will. We've agreed that she will take them in order. It is now. We have 11 minutes left. I think we have 5 or 6 questions, so we'll go for 1 minute plus per questions, and maybe there will be a follow-up. So Fiorella, I let them take you, and maybe Clémence will guide us also if necessary. So please go ahead, and thank you to our audience with so multiple questions. That is what it makes successful.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So indeed, I will just go question by question. Given that we have little time, I will just give a brief answer, and of course, I'm more than happy to expand on the answers after the webinar in a one-on-one if needed. You are always free to contact me. The first one is if biodiversity should not be included in the double materiality assessment. Indeed, yes, that's a critical point. What's happening is that in essence, it should be, but as I started the webinar, the understanding of biodiversity is really immature yet in the market. So when, let's say, engaging a double materiality and asking stakeholders, do you think that biodiversity is material for you? Very often the answer will be no, because they don't know what biodiversity is. So my answer here is yes, it should be engaged in a double materiality assessment, but it should be engaged through data. So are your assets, where are your assets? What are your activities? And then do you have risks? Do you have impacts? And of course, this will be seen, let's say now that we're going through the first phase of the CSRD, we're gonna see a little bit of fluctuation between companies that identified it as no because they just asked stakeholders, versus some companies that already had a little bit more maturity and identified, also including immateriality, not only in own operations, but also in the value chains. For example, if you have mining, agriculture, energy in your supply chain, I think it's very difficult to say that biodiversity is not material. But again, I will stop there, that discussion, because that's a provocative question or answer. The second one is about, are you expecting financial institutions to identify biodiversity as material? Absolutely, yes. What I expect, as I said, there's approximately 70% of dependencies, risks of the loans of financial institutions, of banks. So there's an imminent risk that is completely not yet assessed. So I think, yes, my answer is yes. I understand that there's a limitation for financial institutions to assess it. So that's a different question. And therefore, there has been a hesitation on whether to make it material or not this first time. But in essence, absolutely, it has to be there. It's a direct business risk if not conducted. The next one, Sophie, is concrete examples on harmful versus positive incentives. Here, for example, in tropical countries, there is incentives to produce pineapple, and there's no taxation on it. Pineapple is one of the most harmful crops there is for soil. And therefore, it's expected that in countries like Costa Rica, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, this, let's say, the price of pineapple will increase because there's going to be an added, let's say, taxation that was not there. So it was an incentive. Here within Europe, and of course that implies that the price that we'll receive here in our retail sector will change. On the other side, here in Europe, there is incentives on pesticides use. There's complete, let's say, the complete sector of agriculture has many incentives that indirectly or directly promote the overuse of fertilizers. And that is expected. It has been already in the political agenda for some time for this to, let's say, to be, let's say, more looked at. The same for extensive forestry management. In Europe, there's a lot of extensive forestry management. This is expected also to be managed. So again, there's many different examples, and I'm happy to, again, this needs a little bit more of a view once, let's say, from a sector and country perspective. But as I said, many countries right now, as part of their national strategies and action plans for biodiversity, they are assessing which incentives they have to shift. Next question is, I lost it. How do you perform? This is a very good question. Biodiversity assessment in the financial sector without, let's say, being less competitive in the market. I think this is a critical question because indeed, one point is that, of course, you'll have to start assessing the risks. These are risks that you already have. It's not new risks. It's just the risks that you have overlooked in the financial sector. One point that we have, let's say, discussed a lot with clients is that requesting more information, let's say asking your portfolios, your investees to give you more information, it's a burden. So that can be a competitive disadvantage. But many, so I would say first progressively. So first understanding biodiversity at the sectors, which are your portfolio, which are the sectors, the share of sectors to prioritize there, how many companies you are investing in terms of agriculture, in terms of tourism, in terms of mining and construction, and so on. And from there, define which information already exists, because banks are already collecting a lot of information, and also what is not being collected will be made available with the first CSRD publications. So I think that in the next 4 months, we'll see much more information, and then, of course, start building into all that information that companies have to develop to, let's say, start defining what biodiversity means for the bank. But again, this is a I could talk maybe 1 hour about this question, so I will stop there. But happy to, let's say, engage it after if needed into how the approach that we do with our clients and how we, let's say, take it step by step and ensure that indeed that it is not, it is giving the right message while not, let's say, taking out the investees from your portfolio. Then I have here 2 questions. How do you see the transition to regenerative agriculture as a solution to safeguard nature? I think my first reaction here is that we need a clear definition of what, but regenerative agriculture means many things. And I've seen many companies approaching what the meaning of regenerative agriculture differently. So I use this word carefully, but in essence, I do think that regenerative agriculture has a very strong place in the nature agenda. It cannot be used as a solo. It has to be used with restoration, with practice on efficiency of water use and efficiencies of carbon capturing, on yields. But again, it really depends on which sector and how, in which countries. Again, regenerative agriculture means very different things in different parts of the world. And then on the nature restoration law, one of my very, very good topics. There is, as if you are aware of what's happening in the Commission right now, there is the the deforestation-free regulation was about to enter into force this December and was voted last week to be extended for 1 year. So it's going to be entering into force in December 2025. There is a big pushback, meaning that indeed it was pushed back to that level. However, the regulation remains. What I've seen goes back to the initial part of this meeting is that there's little time to get up to speed. So companies have been delaying to act on, let's say, this regulation is massive. And it has core business risks. If you don't have the information, you cannot enter the products to Europe. As simple as that. So this delay means let's start acting now, because if not, we have to take this advantage to start engaging the topic rather than just sitting back. I don't know if that was the question, but just a reflection there. What is KPMG's nature and biodiversity strategy? That's also an amazing question. So we have several sector, let's say, country-based initiatives, and we also have our own global assessment. What we are doing now is that we had different initiatives in different countries. What we are doing now is we went to the standards. We are TNFD adopters. We identified at the global level which are our main impacts and dependencies, which obviously sit in our value chain. So our strategy is to keep our current local initiatives. For example, here in Belgium, we have our own forest that we are regenerating, and many more. So it really depends. Every country has different things, but we will start looking much more into the value chain impacts. Again, in a nutshell, I see that we ran out of time, so I hand it over to you, Vanessa, again.
Okay, well, I thank you. I want to thank both our colleagues from KPMG. We were very happy to see you. I hope our audience has heard your expertise, and I'm sure we'll liaise when questions come back and people reach out to us. So thank you, Fiorella. Thank you, Clémence. Also, Bart, our friend from The Shift, with whom we're working closely. I also want to thank my colleague Bianca, who's here behind the scenes. And we had 50 plus, almost reaching 60 participants, and that is always good news for us. So I hope it's been worthwhile doing this together with hopefully a lunch break. Remembering us of the fresque coming up. So reminding December 10th, the masterclass coming up, March 13th. And we will also be sharing the whole program for 2025 of events and webinars that will come to our website. And we want to remind, if you give me like 2 seconds for that, if you want to become a member, and stay tuned of everything that's happening, getting our newsletters and supporting us on everything we do. We are very much welcome. Please send us a mail, and we would love to have you as a member. Wishing you a great afternoon, a good week, and a good stretch until the end of the year. Thank you for being here.